When you think of the Odyssey, your mind probably jumps straight to Odysseus, right? His incredible, epic journey. But the women in this story, they are so much more than just background characters. We're talking queens, goddesses, sorceresses, and their stories reveal this absolutely fascinating world of power, influence, and yeah, some pretty strict social rules. So let's dive into their world. Okay, so this really gets us to the core question we're going to be tackling. When we look at the women in Homer's epic, were they really in control of their own lives, or were they just constantly being kept under control by the society around them? It's a huge question, and the answer is, well, it's complicated. So, first things first. To really get what's going on with these women, we have to understand the world they're living in. Homeric society was built on a very, very clear set of rules that basically told a woman exactly where she belonged.
And wow, this really lays it out, doesn't it? The world was split right down the middle. A man's life was out there, in public, politics, war, all that heroic stuff. But a woman's life? It was private. It was confined to the oikos, the household. Her entire value was pretty much measured by how well she managed the home, raised the kids, and, this is a big one, how good she was at the loom.
And this quote, I mean, it's just jaw-dropping, isn't it? This is Odysseus's own son, Telemachus, telling his mom, the Queen of Ithaca, to basically go to her room and get back to her weaving. It's such a powerful reminder that even being royalty didn't make a woman immune to male authority. The main takeaway here is that a woman's world was incredibly restricted, and her worth was all about how well she fit into it.
All right, so we've got the rules of the game. Now, who was the star player? Who was the ideal woman everyone was supposed to be? Well, for that, you don't have to look any further than Odysseus's wife, the famously faithful Penelope. She is held up again and again as the absolute gold standard for what a woman should be.
And here they are, the non-negotiables. To be the ideal woman, you had to be loyal, modest, patient, silent, chaste, and diligent. And Penelope? She's seen as the perfect embodiment of all these virtues, especially for sticking to them for the 20 years she waited for Odysseus to come home. And that brings us right back to the loom. Seriously, keep an eye out for this, because it is everywhere in the Odyssey. From Queen Arete to the goddess Calypso, almost every single important female character is first seen at her loom. It's not just a piece of equipment, it's the ultimate symbol of a woman doing her duty and accepting her place. But here's where it gets really interesting. Just because they were confined, don't for a second think they were powerless. Oh no, these women were incredibly clever, and they found ways to have real influence, even with all these restrictions. Let's see how they did it. And Penelope's famous shroud trick? Oh, it's the absolute masterclass in this. Think about it. She uses the very symbol of her confinement, the loom, as her weapon. She weaves this burial shroud all day, telling the suitors she'll pick one of them when she's done. But then, every night, she secretly unravels it. It's brilliant. It shows that female intelligence was definitely admired, but it had to be subtle. It had to work within the system. And this right here, this is a huge paradox in the Odyssey. Women like Penelope and Queen Arete were genuinely praised for being smart. I mean, Queen Arete was so respected, men would come to her to settle their arguments. But there was always a catch. Their intelligence was only seen as a good thing as long as it helped the men in their lives. You know, protecting a husband's property, preserving his legacy. So what happens when a woman decides to, not play by the rules? What happens when she uses her power for her own goals? Well, the epic gives us some pretty clear and pretty scary warnings about that. Enter Clytemnestra. She is the ultimate what not to do story. You have Penelope on one side, whose loyalty is said to bring glory to all women, and then you have Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife who cheats on him and then murders him. Her story, according to Agamemnon's ghost, has heaped shame on all of her sex. The message couldn't be clearer. And, this double standard, it goes all the way to the top, all the way to Mount Olympus. Just listen to this quote from the goddess Calypso. She is furious because she's being forced to let her mortal lover Odysseus go, and she just lets loose on the hypocrisy of the male gods. And you know what? She's got a point, a big one. The poem is full of male gods having affairs with mortal women, and nobody bats an eye. But when a goddess does it, she gets punished. So the lesson is pretty clear. Whether you're a goddess or a mortal, if you're female and you step out of line, there are consequences. Okay, so this is all pretty complicated, right? You've got these powerful but restricted women, these double standards. How do we make sense of it all? Luckily, modern classical scholars give us some amazing tools to help us analyze these roles a little deeper.
Take Nancy Felsen. She argues we shouldn't just see Penelope as some passive victim waiting around. She calls her a thinking character, someone who is actively experimenting with possible plots, like the shroud trick, to try and take control of her own situation, even within all those patriarchal rules. Then you've got Lillian E. Dougherty, who points out how, well, ambivalent the poem is about women. It's like it has a love-hate relationship with them. It loves and rewards women who are supportive listeners, like Penelope and Artie, but it actively tries to shut down dangerous female voices, like the sirens, who might challenge the hero's story.
And Penelope Murray builds on that. She points out that so many of the powerful, supernatural women Odysseus meets, Circe, Calypso, the sirens, they all pose a direct threat to his very identity as a hero. They challenge his role as a husband, a king, a man. So what these scholars show us is that the Odyssey is very aware of the power its female characters have, and it's constantly trying to manage that power. So when we put all these pieces together, what do we get? We get this incredible, fascinating paradox at the very heart of the Odyssey when it comes to its women. This chart just nails that central tension, doesn't it? On the one hand, there's this huge amount of respect for female influence and wisdom. Arete is settling men's arguments. But on the other hand, there's this constant, heavy restriction on their freedom. It's a society that is literally pulling in two opposite directions at the same time. So at the end of the day, what does this all boil down to? It's this. A woman's identity in the epic is almost never just her own. Her value, her virtue, her actions, it's all tied to defining the honor and the legacy of the men in her life. Odysseus's entire identity as a hero is wrapped up in Penelope being faithful back home. And that leaves us with one last big question, something for you to chew on. It really gets to the core anxiety running through the entire poem, a fear that Agamemnon's ghost is obsessed with after what his wife did to him. Or is all their cleverness, all their plotting and their intelligence, is it just a tool they had to develop to survive in a world that was always trying to keep them under control? It's a great question to think about.